I imagine to be like Steven Spielberg of independent cinema, right?
It's Charcha-cast. I'm Nick Novak. With me today is someone very exciting. It's Faraz Ansari. I'm going to have to read this so I get it right, Faraz. Independent, queer, non-binary Muslim filmmaker from right here in Mumbai.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to have you on the
Thank
show.
you so much.
So, look, let's start a little bit since we let off with words, right? Let's talk about words for a quick second. Queer, LGBTQI, non-binary. Walk us through a little bit your view on sort of what these words mean and how people use them.
Well, I think if you look at it, they are just words to begin with. But when you start looking at it in a broader spectrum and start adding value to what it really means, especially to a person of color from India, things start to change a bit, you know. And although non-binary is a very recent addition to my life, because when you start traveling and when you start meeting people, your horizons, your understanding of who you are as a person also start growing. And I think it's a lot to do with who I am as a person that kind of evolved as time went by. And yeah, I think all these words found a way to me, words that you kind of feel more attached to in that sense, and words that really represent who you are, because I think my journey as a filmmaker has been all about that. It's to find who I am through the stories I tell. And I think the best way to do that is to find who you are to begin with, you know. Yeah. Like Frida Kahlo said, like, she needs to know who she is and fall in love with who she is as a person before she can even create something.
So, but what does non-binary mean to you? Like, what does that represent?
It's gender fluid, you know. I don't want to fit in any binary that puts me in a box as a male or as a female, because I think they both come with their own limitations and their own prejudices attached to gender. And I think gender is so fluid, you know. I mean, one morning I wake up, I feel more masculine. The other morning I might feel more feminine. And then to kind of redefine yourself every day is such a task, especially like being a queer person already. Every day is almost a coming out day to someone in that sense, you know. The minute you walk into a cafe or you walk into, I don't know, like your film set, people will immediately judge you for who you are, and you have to come out in some way or the other. So I feel in that journey as a queer person, you have to come out, and I felt, let's go the whole mile and also come out as a non-binary person. So it just makes life easier for me, you know. I don't have to fit in a box anymore.
But let's talk about the word queer for a second. Just because I can remember as a child, and I look back now in horror, but we played a children's game called Smear the Queer. This is a game, and this is a game that was played throughout the United States. Yeah. And you would basically go around and try to tackle one person and I didn't know what it meant. It was just a game, right?
Yeah.
But now I sort of have this like the word queer has a very negative connotation,
sure,
almost like a slur. But yet you sort of identify yourself as queer. So what does that word mean to you, and has that word come full circle?
I think given the queer community, every slur that was thrown at us, we've taken that as a prized possession, you know. Whether it's faggot or whether it's queer, we've really celebrated those words, we've embraced those words. And I think that speaks massively about the community on itself, you know, that nothing is going to bring us down, you know. We celebrate whatever we get. And I think in that journey, I come very late because I was born in the late 80s and I grew up in the 90s. So my understanding of being a queer person in India was very limited, because India was still finding a voice in the queer spectrum, you know. We didn't know who was, you know. And growing up in a very liberal Muslim family, my parents allowed me to be who I am, and there was a constant discussion of who I like and who I don't like. And through all of that, they allowed me to explore myself. Again, this comes from a place of extreme privilege in that sense, you know, that I was allowed to choose who I wanted to be, and or maybe just find who I am in that sense. So these words, again, I think they are a great celebration of identity, and I think that's how I look at them.
Yeah. But so one of the things that really attracted me to having you on and to talking to you is your story. You have a really, really good story.
Thank you.
But let's talk a little bit about that. You grew up in a Muslim household, which you describe as liberal, but I mean, that means different things to different people. what was sort of, let's maybe fast forward through childhood a little bit and get towards your late teen years. Where were you at that point, and sort of what happened next?
Well, I think I was really bullied in school.
Okay.
I think when you are a little different, people really don't want you to be different. They want you to be like everyone else. They want to identify with who you are. And the easiest way to identify with someone is if they're more like who you are, in terms of your behavior and all of that. And I never was really, at home, I was allowed to be who I wanted to be. So there was a constant disconnect when I used to go to school, because people were like I was constantly being bullied for who I was. And that really created a great deal of discomfort, because it was all external. Internally, I was very cool with who I was.
Okay.
So the pressures were more external, and I just had to find a way to go around that. So, of course, a teenage years, especially for a person who is queer, are way more difficult than otherwise. But yeah, it was a journey, and I'm glad I found a way around it. And my family was very embracing in that sense. Of course, they had questions about my future and, where do I stand given where India was then and where India is. They still have questions. I think acceptance is multidimensional in that sense. It's not just, one layer, and once people accept you for who you are and it's done, it's not that. I think acceptance is an everyday journey. And I think that is something that is continuous. It's going on.
Yeah,
with
there's
myself
a
and
spectrum of acceptance
Absolutely.
too, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
there's sort of, I don't like it, but I accept it, versus I wholly embrace it.
Absolutely.
And acceptance doesn't necessarily mean condoning or whatever it is. At some point, you ended up going to the United States on an exchange program. Talk about that a little bit.
That was actually life-changing for me, because I think I was 17 when I was taken out of my nest and just, put on a flight to America. And I think for a 17-year-old, it is such an influential age to be, because you're really forming your identity, who you are and what you want to be. And when I went to the US, I was really exposed to a different world altogether, a world where people were allowed to be who they wanted to be and celebrate themselves. And I think that identity understanding was very essential for me to come back home with that. And I almost felt like I was in charge of myself, I had found a way to deal with homophobia in that sense, because I saw a lot of queer people in the US who were living great lives, openly in that sense. So that was really transformative for me. And I'm glad that happened so early in life, because then I could imbibe those qualities and bring them back home within the community back home. So that was incredible.
Okay, so you get back from the United States, and then how do you sort of begin this journey to embark on this journey as a filmmaker?
I wanted to be a filmmaker since I was 4 years old.
You're kidding. How do you know at 4 years old you want to be a filmmaker?
I'll be honest with you. I love to tell stories, and I think when I was 4 years old, I come from a very cosmopolitan family, so we celebrate every festival at home. And I think it was Diwali, where I had my aunts visiting from the US, and I used to put up this little play every Diwali for them. And I had my Barbie dolls and my He-Mans and my G.I. Joes, very gender fluid even then. And I put up a play with them, and they were watching it, and one of my aunts, she walked up to me and she's like, "Is that what you want to do when you grow up?" And I said, "What is that?" She said, "You want to tell stories through people." And I said, "I think so." She's like, "Oh." And then she turned to my mother and she said, your child wants to be a filmmaker."
Huh.
And that just got on.
Wow.
It just stuck to me like hard glue. And yeah, I think it was great. I really resonated with that. And I think it was just about finding a way how to become a filmmaker, because India, when I was growing up, you'd be shocked to know that we don't really have film-sensitive courses way back in the day. So when I had to graduate, it could just be arts or commerce or science.
Okay.
That's it, right? There's no majoring in anything, there's no minoring in anything like it happens in the US. So I think when I went to the US, I kind of realized that there's so much more to do in terms of education as well. And I always wanted to go back and, kind of have access to that, as a filmmaker. But I think those 6 weeks were educative enough in that sense to kind of come back and be like, I can be independent and I can do this on my own, you know, and find my own voice.
Yeah, but what does that look like? I mean, do you go and buy a video camera and you know, start going and here's my film, or like what's that step?
You write. That's
write.
where it begins.
Okay, you start with write.
Yeah, it begins on a blank sheet of paper, as overwhelming as that, right? Just staring at a blank sheet of paper. And I think finding the courage to write a story that really resonates with who you are as a person. So that's where it started off for me. And I kept writing as a child. Even in school, you know, I think some people are just born writers. You write stories, you write poems, whatever. And I kept writing. And one fine day, I had the courage to reach out to someone who had a camera and be like, I have a story to tell, and I have a few friends who are actors. Maybe we could all get along and tell a story. And that's how it happened.
Okay. What was that first film?
Oh God, it was the worst.
Everyone always looks, at the time you didn't think it was the worst. At the time you thought it was amazing.
Well, I in my head, I imagined to be like Steven Spielberg of independent cinema, right? That's who I imagined to be. Obviously turned out to be a total mess. And it was extremely embarrassing, but it was great learning, right? And I think when the great learning happens, then I think there are no regrets in life. So great learning happened so that I made a film called Fish Tank, which was actually quite relevant because it explored gender identity, it explored a dysfunctional family, it explored a young teenage boy going through great reckoning within and externally. And yeah, it just turned out to be a badly shot film. But I'm proud of it in some sense. Like,
well, I think you kind of like this. People always say this, right? Oh, it was such a mess. It was so terrible.
But it was.
But like that was your, and forgive the pun, that was your coming out moment, right? Like that was
true.
That should have like that's like the art you draw as a kid, like, you know, and it's terrible, but you're like, nah, this is the beginning of it all.
Yeah.
Okay, so eventually you end up writing a film called Sisak.
Yeah.
Which was, and I may get this wrong as well, the first silent LGBT film in India.
Yeah, that's right.
What was the thinking behind that film?
So actually, before that, I did write a few films for others.
Okay.
Sadly, I didn't have the support to direct them on my own because I wrote them for the big directors who had more fame and who had a career, so they chose them to direct the film over me. But I did write a lot of films before that. I also kind of was the associate director on many of the films that I wrote. But yes, Sisak was my first independent film in that sense. And so I actually wrote Sisak in 2013 when for a brief amount of time Section 377 was read down. And I felt great happiness and I wanted to express it, but immediately my happiness was so short-lived because a lot of religious groups started standing up and defending 377 and they wanted it back in action, and then it was brought back in action in December 2013. And I remember I was in a hill station up way north, and a lot of my friends reached out to me expressing how exposed they felt. It was almost like a witch hunt because a lot of people started coming out.
Oh, only to have it then sort of like
and then just to take it back,
okay.
You know, just for like a few months. So they felt exposed, they felt, because they had been vocal about their relationships, you know, and all of that. And I felt so helpless sitting in a small hill station in North India, writing a film about a cisgender man loving a cisgender woman, because that's what works in Bollywood, right? So I was writing that film and that thing was a slap on my face. I was just like, what am I doing? You know, what is the point of being an independent queer filmmaker if I'm not really going to use the privilege of being a filmmaker to express the stories that are most important to be told? And that's when I wrote Sisak. It wasn't meant to be a film. It was just a poem really on 4 pages of, you know, paper. And when I revisited it many years later, I think in 2016, and I said, well, I think I'm ready now to make it into a film. And I just had to I had to sell my car. I had to put my apartment on rent, and I had to call a few close friends saying, I have some money with me, let's make a film. It's a silent film about two men who meet on the Bombay local train. We're not going to get any permissions from the local authorities. We're going to put the camera in a backpack, get on a train, and make this film.
And they said, I'm in.
And
it's not much of a pitch.
Well, they were like, you want to get us killed, or you want to get us behind bars, what is up with you? But I think I had to take that risk, I think it was just the right time. It felt right. It felt right for some reason. And
are you cognizant of risk, though? I mean, so
No.
in this, it kind of takes us, your next film project, Sheer Korma, is about two Muslim women, two lesbian Muslim women, which, it's almost like you're a glutton for punishment, right? And talk about taking risks. You're taking two huge risks, right?
Yeah.
Both on the gender sexuality piece and also on the religious piece. So do you feel your safety is at risk? Does that cross your mind when you're doing these projects?
Yeah, I think I do, and I think that is something that I have made peace with, the fact that, because being an openly queer Muslim non-binary filmmaker in India, the amount of hate I get on social media, the amount of hate I get within the queer community, the amount of hate I get across, it's just something that, and it's so sad to say, but, I have kind of got okay with that. I've got okay with the hate, and it's just terrible. But I think you reach a point that you cannot really pay attention to that, but carry forward your legacy, and you just want to do what you want to do. And I felt this was the right time to open a conversation about sexuality and religion and talk about it in a more mainstream sort of aspect, rather than it being a edgy independent film. I wanted it to be mainstream because I feel these conversations don't need to happen on the frills of the society. It needs to be mainstream. It needs to happen in every living room across India, and how to do it in the best possible way. So I had to find really well-known, celebrated actors from the Indian film industry to come forward and be like, we'll be a part of your film, because you have something relevant to say, something important to say, and about time to talk about it, in the best possible way, without making people uncomfortable, really. So, yeah, of course, there is constant fear, because the day I remember the poster of Sheer Korma got released, my Twitter was full of hate. A lot of fundamentalists were tagging other fundamentalists, asking them, requesting them, begging them to ask me to stop the film and boycott my film and declare a fatwa on me, and all of that happened.
I want to ask about the hate, though, and I'm sorry to drag you down this road, but I think it's relevant. It's two Muslim women falling in love. Was the hate, was it anti-LGBT hate? Was it Muslims thinking that this is against God? Like, what was the sort of the focus of it?
You'd be surprised. It was actually from the right-wing Hindutva fundamentalist groups who were requesting the counterparts in Islam to declare a fatwa on me.
So you brought together intra-religious fundamentalists over the LGBT issue. All right. Well.
I united them with hate.
Yeah.
I gave them a reason to come together. So it was very multi-layered in that sense, because they were like, we hate you, but we're going to unite on this and hold hands and hate you together briefly, and then condemn you and continue to, so it was just...
So you get attacked online, but we were speaking earlier, and you've been the subject of some harassment in person and sort of in real life as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it happened when I made Sasak, and Sasak got great exposure in the West, and it won 59 international awards, becoming the first ever Indian film actually to win so many awards, which is such a big milestone for Indian cinema, and ironically, none of those awards were ever won in India, which again speaks of how non-embracing the community back here is. And I remember I was on the front page of a newspaper, and I was sitting at Delhi airport, and I was clicking a picture to send it to my mom, because it was such a big moment to see yourself, on the front page of a big newspaper. And I wanted to share that moment with her. And before I could know, I had like hot coffee thrown on my face by this man. And then he turned to me and he said, people like you should be murdered for making such films. And in all honesty, I don't think he had even watched my film. He just read the headlines and he read what I was trying to do and who I am, and he had so much hate for me. So it was things like this really, like shake you off for a bit, but then they also reaffirm your faith that it is so important to go out and tell these stories. I mean, Harvey Milk had to take a gun, I mean, he had to take a bullet, to stand up for what they believed in. So I think it's important to keep doing. Of course, it comes with a great deal of putting yourself out there and at risk to these things, but somebody's got to do it.
So you just said, the story has to be told, but it sounds like you also have a hard time maybe getting that story out to where you want to get it out, at least within India. Would you feel comfortable doing a screening of your film on a university campus in India?
With Sheer Korma, I don't know, to be very honest. And the reason I don't know is because, it's not just about the queer people, it's also about the queer Muslim people. It's also about non-binary people, my film. So it's really going to, and especially given where India is, with minority rights and the queer rights and people who don't identify in the limited LGBTQ spectrum, non-binary people for that matter. I don't know if it will be a safe thing to take it to Indian universities, because even with film like Sisak, which is a silent film, where these two men who fall in love with each other without even holding each other, without even shaking hands with each other, that film had so much of resistance when I took it to campuses across India. On the day of the screening, I was constantly called and asked to back out, not show up, or this will happen to me, that will happen to me. They were really threatening me. But I went on and I screened the film. I think with Sheer Korma, I'm really scared. So I just have to be cautious. I mean, I've made the film, but I don't know if I will be actually able to take it across Indian campuses, although I really, really, really want to.
What about sort of mainstream cinema houses?
Given the fact it is a longer short film, it is 30 minutes in duration, I don't think India has woken up to the fact that even short films, slightly longer short films, can be great revenue-making exercise, especially when they have the big actors. So I don't think we're going to find distribution and exhibition. Here's another thing which I must share, that short films in general, across film festivals, across the world, are always treated like they don't belong there, because they want to favor feature films. When film festivals reach out to me and I ask them, hey, will you be flying me in? They're like, well, we only fly feature filmmakers. So there is so much of, it's a constant battle to kind of put your stories out, and people don't realize the amount of risk it involves in making a short film than making a feature film. Right?
No, you're right. I look at something like the Oscars too, where they always give an award out for best short film, and I've never seen any of them.
Exactly.
Right? A lot of times because I don't know where to see them.
Sure.
Right? Where do short films? Where are they shown? Where do I find them? I'm asking you. Where do I find a short film?
Yeah. Well, with Sisak, it was a lot of 150 film festivals.
Okay.
And other than that, and if you can't really make it to a film festival, you find it on some OTT platform somewhere, which I did not do with my earlier film. I, in fact, put it on YouTube for free.
Oh, right on.
Because a lot of people from the Middle East reached out to me. A lot of people from Islamic countries reached out to me saying, we really want to watch your film, but we don't have access to OTT platforms. We don't even have a credit card to buy a subscription for a paid OTT platform. So how do we access your film? And I had to take a decision that I said, let me make the film available for free on YouTube. So wherever you are in the world, you can access it if you get to know about the film, that is. Again, there's another thing, that being a person of color, being a queer person of color, our voices are never really heard on a more global platform, So a film like Sisak needed great PR exercise across the West. And that actually came in from the awards that we constantly were winning. It was almost like 2 awards a week. So much so that it kind of got really exhausting and extremely pressurizing for me as a filmmaker. I was like, if my first film has won 59 awards, how will I match up to this? It kind of sets up a ballpark, a landmark, a milestone for you, which is kind of unachievable, you know. I didn't want to make a film to win awards. I just wanted to make a film because I had a story to tell, you know, and it's exactly the case with the new film. I had a story to tell. I found a way to tell it. I must also share this with you. When I wrote Sheer Korma and I started reaching out to producers, potential producers in India, one producer actually sat across me and said, "Why do you want to make a film with women protagonists?"
Ha! It wasn't even about they're lesbian or it's we're going to stop you at female protagonists.
And here's the thing: after Section 377 was read down, being gay is the new cool. It's the new black, right? So
everyone's good with.
They were great. They were like, make this into, you know, 2 male protagonists, and we'll support it. We'll give you money, and also don't make it into a Muslim family. You don't want to get into that. And I was like, oh no, but my film is about queer Muslim women. It has to be that. So it was the battle that I had to fight even then to make this film. And then I really lucked out because I found this amazing, the producer who agreed to be like, you do you. And here's another fun fact. Sheer Korma, 95% of my crew is composed entirely of women. Huh. Women of color. So, I mean, my set was like, majorly women, and like there were like just like few men around floating. So
did that change the vibe of what a typical set would be like? How does it change the vibe?
I think it just makes, given what Sheer Korma is as a film, it is a very sublime, subtle understanding of love and acceptance. There's no toxic masculinity. I keep saying my film is toxic masculine free, and I think having being surrounded by so many women creators, be it my producer, be it my editor, be it my production designer, my line producer, all women. And that kind of really adds on to an energy on set, you know, which is very intangible. It's very hard to put in words, but I think when you're on set, you kind of feel it, you know. It's very different from men kind of running around, being very alpha about it. Here are these women nurturing you, guiding you gently into telling the story the way you want to. So that actually turned out to be a great experience for me, and it's something that I want to stick with, because I think when we talk about representation, we really talk about representation in very limited capacities. We don't really talk about representation in a larger sense. I think representation not just in front of the camera but also behind the camera matters largely, especially the kind of stories that I want to tell.
Sure, but in front of the camera you got some pretty big star power for this film as well. Who's in the film?
So there is Shabana Azmi.
Okay.
I think she's won 5 to 6 national awards. I have Divya Datta again. She's won many national awards, and I have Swara Bhaskar. So 3 fantastic actors from Indian cinema who decided to support the story. And I think, you know, this helps because I want the film to be mainstream. I think enough telling stories about the queer people in independent cinema. Of course, that should continue, but I think it's time to break into the mainstream. And mainstream needn't be male-dominated. It needn't have male protagonists. It needn't be crass. It needn't be loud. It can be sublime. It can be gentle. It can be feminine. And I think that's something I want to re-explore, you know, redefine mainstream while I'm at it. Because I think there is a place for all of us under the sun. And I think especially in the global cinema spectrum, the queer Muslim women continue to be the most underrepresented community. You know, I mean, what was the last time you saw a film about queer Muslim women?
That's why, you know, it's funny. I was shocked to see a film being made about the subject, frankly, because it does seem so potentially divisive. And if you told me to name a famous queer Muslim woman anywhere, I don't know that I could.
Exactly.
And that's interesting, right? And why? It doesn't mean that they don't exist.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so how do these actors, the actresses, how do they respond when you approach them with a script like this? Are they concerned for their own backlash? And I don't want you to put words in their mouth, but what was the sense from them?
So all these 3 women are quite revolutionary. All the 3 actresses in my film, they are very revolutionary in their own path, and not just in cinema but outside of cinema. They've been great social revolutionaries. They've been fighting and standing up for great causes, humanitarian causes, and causes that concern minorities, and being allies to the queer community in that sense, all three of them. So when I reached out to them, it was more to do with the fact that they believed in the story and what it would do potentially once it is made. And they didn't really honestly care about what would happen to them professionally, which a lot of actors generally do. You know, they're very concerned about, and why not, they should be. But these three incredible actors in that sense, they just said, let's do this, you know, and we don't care what's going to happen, but this is an important story to tell, and we're going to back you for it. If you're going to have the courage to go out there and make this story, we will invest in you with our talent and help you tell this story. It was an understanding of sorts in that sense. So it was just like great minds coming together and saying, let's just put this together and let's see what happens, you know.
Have you found, I don't know if acceptance is the right word, but understanding within the Islamic community?
You know, that is a very interesting question, because I am not very interactive with the community, because the Islamite practice is very personal to me. And I think there are various understandings of Islam as a religion, and of course, like every other religion does. And I feel that my Islam is personal. My Islam is a religion of peace. It is a religion of love. And I don't think... I remember this one thing which I must share with you. When I was growing up, my mum used to keep reminding me the 99 names that Allah has. And one of them is the most merciful, the most forgiving, the most compassionate, the most loving. And this is my understanding of God. And when I know this, I put 2 + 2 together, and I'm like, how can my God be hateful of anyone? You know, it's just a non-valid conversation. God is all accepting, God is all loving, God is all forgiving. So everything that you do is accepted already, it is embraced already. So my identity of who I am as a queer person is embraced already. My identity of who I love has been embraced already. So I think that is my understanding of Islam. Of course, it does not fit into the mainstream understanding of what Islam is known for, you know, in the mainstream. But I think that is my job also, as, you know, coming from a Muslim family. I feel it is important for the world to understand that how normal Muslim families are, you know. We don't live in homes that have green walls. We don't have guns. We don't belong to any terrorist organizations. When I was growing up, I remember my mother constantly reminding me that your religion is love and peace, and that is it. You know, I was never forced to do anything that I didn't want to. And I think that sort of access never really finds representation in mainstream media, you know. It's always about what sells, what's going to, you know, create a stir, what's going to create a storm, and let's talk about that. But I think there is a narrative that exists beyond that, the narrative of real people like me, you know, and that narrative is so important to be put out and celebrated. There's another very interesting thing. My mother's elder sister, who I lost in 2010 to cancer, I was very close to her. She really brought me up, and she was one of the most iconic women I have known in my life. And she constantly used to say this one thing, that without God's will, there's not a single thing in the universe that happens. And I believe in that, you know. She used to say, even the fluttering of the leaves that happen on trees is God's will. So if everything is God's will, everyone is valid in that sense.
Yeah.
You know, of course, it opens a deeper conversation in so many ways. But I think when it comes to love, I think how can love be a crime? How can love be a sin? It's so blasphemous to even think in that sense. You know, love is not a sin.
I find this dichotomy, though, of what appears to be your life, where you're the subject of so much hate, but everything that you seem to stand for and everything that you seem to preach in your message has been love and kindness, right? In fact, I think I saw an email from you that you signed it, it's like Love and Rainbows or something.
Love and Bright Lights.
Yeah, you know, and just that this movie, right, Shir Korma, it's not a it's a love story that just happens to be about two Muslim women, right? All the sort of points that you bring up about religion and your activism or your artistic vision is about love, yet you seem to be the recipient of an awful lot of hate. And I wonder, how do you maintain sort of this positive vision and outlook when you do have so much hate coming in at you?
Yeah, I think that's a constant negotiation that one has to deal with. When I think being an artist and being out there, you really are very vulnerable at all points in time, you know, because everything that is thrown at you, you have to accept it, embrace it, and convert it into art. And I think all of that hate kind of gets converted within me and gets transformed into love. I don't know how it happens. I don't know why it happens. I've been trying to figure that out myself, if there is a code to it, if there's a math to it. But I sucked at math in school, so of course I'm going to fail at that equation. But I think when you know what hate can do, the potential that hate has, and the amount of damage it can do, it is a constant choice that belongs to you, that you have to choose love over hate through and through. Of course, it is very taxing. I went through depression through 2017 because of the hate that was being thrown at me, and it was just like volatile hate, you know, not just online bullying and online harassment, but harassment happening around me, you know, when I was traveling and being a queer person of the color and traveling to, you know, the West. It is not a very friendly place to begin with, it really really made me all the more sensitive towards telling stories about love, because I feel there has to be a balance that has to be restored in the universe, you know. The amount of hate I get, it has to equal up to the amount of love I can give,
right on.
You know. So I think that balance is very essential. It's all about the yin and yang, you know.
Sure.
So when the yin keeps increasing, you find a way to increase the yang and bring it back into, you know, equal it up.
And we come full circle to religion.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. I'd love to chat more. Maybe we'll have you back and talk some more, but we'll have to sort of leave it there for now. Faraz Ansari, queer, non-binary, Muslim filmmaker extraordinaire. The movie out right now is Sheer Korma, coming to a film festival near you and maybe other places as well. Encourage you to check it out. And where else can we find you? FarazAnsari.com or something, or?
Well, I am verified on Twitter. Okay.
So follow on Twitter, but say nice things.
Or Instagram. I mean, I think Instagram is more of a safe space compared to Twitter, because Twitter is so full of hate.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Maybe it's the pictures, right?
I think it's just visual, you know. It's more of a visual medium. So I think when you look at happy pictures and
I gotta tell you, it's hard to be mad at this. Like, you're like the least mad.
You're just kind. No, you're just kind. I know, but I think it's important to have a visual reference. So Instagram is the best place to find me and my work. And of course, Sheer Korma is going to travel to a lot of festivals across the world.
Cool.
And not just festivals, but also universities, colleges, schools, and who knows, maybe at a city near you or in your city.
Okay, cool. All right, we'll leave it there. That's Charcha-cast. That's Faraz Ansari. I'm Nick Novak.